Tell me how you were able to kind of expedite that journey to black belt.
So I think the rule is good, but there's a lot of problems with what just happened as well. One is if it's like an instructor who's kind of using that instructor role, and every white belt girl who comes in the door, they're kind of like hitting on them and making that just a dating pool. I think that's a little bit different than maybe like two purple belts who are just hanging out and then they kind of start dating and things.
Hello, Jiu-Jitsu fans. Today I am being joined by Atos black belt Amanda Bruse, and we have a lot of things to talk about, but she's a very busy girl, so we're going to try to keep it concise because she has a competition coming up this upcoming weekend. So Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time. What is a typical match week or fight week? I call them fights, but a lot of people, they're
Mhm.
like, it's a match, it's not a fight. So what does a
Yeah,
typical
get mad.
fight week look for you?
Um, yeah, I think it depends on the tournament. Like if you're doing an actual tournament where you have a bunch of matches, definitely throughout the week I start to taper. I'm kind of one of those people who likes to train pretty normally up until like 2 days before. But then I'll definitely just start like drilling and keeping it light. But I definitely start tapering at least intensity down throughout the week to kind of rest up because I think you actually get a ton of important rest just by tapering down a little bit. So I do try to do a little bit of tapering. If it's just one match, I'm pretty much going to be training until like the day before, probably.
Wow. So when it comes to training jujitsu, you're so kind of, being active in that. But when it comes to like lifting weights and stuff, or do you kind of like really,
Yeah. So
not do that?
lifting weights is the thing that I'll cut out. Usually I'm not gonna the last lift, I like to do it like the weekend before. I do not want to be sore. If I'm cutting weight, I do not want to be lifting like legs where I'm gonna retain water. So definitely I start cutting out lifting probably like a week before. And if I need to do like light cardio and things like that, I'll do that. But I don't want to do anything that's gonna cause like inflammation or strain my body in any type of way. So that's kind of my focus is keeping it light, keeping movement, maybe some yoga, like things that are just going to keep everything loose.
Yeah, you're definitely a seasoned competitor at this point, and a lot of people might be surprised that you've only been doing jujitsu for around 6 or 7 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's between like 6 and 7. I started when I was like a little over 16. I'm 23 now, so I got my black belt in about 6 years. Yeah.
So did you start in San Diego, or were you somewhere else when you were first starting?
I started at a smaller school in upstate New York called Black Hole Jiu-Jitsu. So I actually went there for, I would say 2 years. I got my purple belt and then I immediately moved to Autos. And I've been at Autos since December 2018. So I've been there for most of my jiu-jitsu career now. But I started at kind of a more local school.
And so you told me, before this interview started that the reason you were moving is because your family had different jobs and then they ended up in San
Mhm.
Diego. Did you seek out Otto specifically because it had a competitive edge to it? Or was it just something, a gym that was nearby and it just happened to be, taught by one of the greatest black belts of all time?
Right. Actually, so I visited San Diego about a year before I moved out here to do my first Worlds, and I visited Autos during that time. It was the only gym that I visited, and like when I visited, it just like blew my mind because I'd never been around so many females on the mat. I got there and there was like female black belts there. There were like OGs like Luisa Montero, people who I'd been watching for like since I was a white belt. And in that moment, I was like, I want to move out here, but it wasn't really in the cards for me. And then I don't know how it worked out, but my dad decided to move here and he moved 15 minutes from Autos. So everything kind of just fell into place. And I was like, this is my new home. I'm going there. And everything kind of just worked out.
And what was your athletic background before jujitsu? Were you into any type of wrestling or any other type of sport that complements jujitsu? Or did you just, go into a new sport and completely start killing it?
Yeah, so I think I did jujitsu for like a couple months when I was like 5. And then I did like one little white belt tournament and I lost and I cried and then I quit. And then besides that, the only thing I did was like I power lifted. So I pretty much just did a solo sport. I was just lifting. So I'd never really done any other kind of like combat sport, grappling, wrestling, anything like that. It was kind of just something that my dad was like thinking that I would like because he did like Krav Maga or something random when he was younger. And he found a school and he was like, I think you're going to like this. And he sent me there and I went and that was it. I was like, I'm doing this every day forever.
That's so amazing that you actually started when you were around 5 years old. And then, you had a negative experience. You maybe don't have the maturity yet to realize that's just part of the journey. So, when you look at your journey in jujitsu now, you're a black belt, but what is the biggest realization that you've had on this journey?
Man, the biggest realization I've had on this journey, I think the biggest realization is just it's really changed me as a person, like, actually doing the whole journey to black belt, and I think the biggest realization is just the ability to do really hard things. Like, that wasn't something that I thought I could do. I kind of had, like I had a lot of anxiety growing up, so every time I was faced with, like, an obstacle, it kind of scared me and I would kinda back out of it, and jujitsu kind of, like, really forces you to deal with difficult situations and difficult things and grow through them, so I think it kind of just changed how I deal with, struggles, like, changed how I deal with, coming to something that's difficult, and so that's kind of the biggest realization, I think.
That's definitely something that a lot of people say they experience on their jujitsu journey. I talked to a teammate of yours, Rose Miller, who just recently posted about the blue belt blues and feeling
Mm,
like you're not making any more progress, or there's just, negative thoughts. And I even talked to Jessica Khan, who considered quitting jujitsu because she was
mm.
just feeling so defeated at times. So when things do get a little bit on the darker side, or you're not finding as much of success as you'd like, what is your mindset and how do you kind of combat that, sense of insecurity in your skill set?
Yeah, I mean, that's a super common problem. It's also something I've been dealing with more, as your first year at black belt, it creates a whole different environment for you. Like, you might have a really easy time progressing all the way up through the colored belts, and then you hit a certain level and you're like, "Oh my god, like, I feel like I can't get better. I feel like there's a big gap." I think what it makes you do is kind of sit down and reevaluate the way in which you're approaching things. I think it makes you focus on being creative, and you have to kind of take a step back, and when you put too much pressure on the progress, it kind of ruins the sport in a way. It kind of takes away like that excitement and that drive for training. And I think going back to your roots and remembering like why you started training, having fun with it and viewing it more like a puzzle and problem solving and viewing it from that kind of angle versus like a goal oriented angle is actually what will get you to that goal faster, if that makes sense.
Interesting. And in your competition background, you face a lot of big names. Just to name a few: Victoria Anthony, goals when it comes to wrestling; Tammy Musamechi,
Amazing.
now
Love her.
she's awesome. Tammy Musamechi, who is now with one championship; Alex Enriquez; Jasmine Hosha. So when you look at some of the people that you've competed against, who do you remember as being one of the toughest competitions?
I always have hard matches with Alex and Jasmine. That's like the two. I feel like once you get to a certain level, you always have those couple people where you're always kind of head to head. And then it's kind of just a race on who's going to get the better in those moments. And so those are two people who, and I obviously like Alex is Atos, so love her and we're good and stuff. But those are the people who I'm kind of in that group with, where we're all trying to aim for the same thing. We're all kind of close there. So definitely those two people.
And when we think about one of the most viral moments in jujitsu sports world, I know it's not viral when it comes to, maybe all of combat sports, or definitely not the regular sports world, but one of the most viral jujitsu moments we had was when Jasmine Rocca was, egging on Fionn Davis, saying, "Oh, what are you going to do? You beat me with a basic knee cut," and, talking some shit. So what do you think is the responsibility of athletes to kind of promote the fight or match that they have coming up? Because I know when it comes to girls, they don't really like to, be disrespectful as much, because it's more, jujitsu is more of like a respectful type of sport.
Mhm.
But what is your take on people who do kind of like to spice things up? And do you see yourself ever, being able to step in that world?
Yeah, so I don't really have a problem with people like shit talking. I think it's kind of funny. I think that if that's your thing and that's kind of your persona, that's your athlete persona, like by all means do it, as long as you're not crossing like obvious boundaries of being like a respectful human being. Like, there's definitely a way to trash talk but not really dig at someone in a personal way. Like, there's a way to keep it kind of professional to promote the fight and things like that. I actually think it's kind of an interesting way for girls to do it because it's not that common, like you said. So if you want to crap talk and all that kind of stuff, I think it's great. I would try, but I just feel like I'm too nice. I feel like I wouldn't be able to, like, be good at it. So I think it's not really gonna be my thing, but I do think that, I'm gonna try to come in and be tough and, like, let you know that, like, I'm ready to fight and things like that, but, it's not really my thing, but I do enjoy watching it.
Yes, I love talking to some of the younger athletes. Like you're only 23, Jessica Khan's pretty young as well. And when I talk to you guys are all just so sweet sounding. So when we do think about like putting on big matches and big platforms, I think it works well when you have like someone who doesn't really like to talk so much shit, and then
Mhm.
someone who will really put it all out there. But then even if people aren't being like pro wrestler about it, I
Mhm.
think there's sometimes just little slides that girls like to do. Like I can't
Yeah.
remember in just including things in their caption like, oh well, she had a good game plan for me, but her strategy was good, but she didn't get the sub or different things like that. So there's little nicks that you can get in there.
Yeah, there's
So
little things that you gotta try to do to, like, get in people's head or kind of put those little things away, like, I think that's a kind of part of being an athlete, right? Like, you do have to be your own advocate, and sometimes that means, like, talking a little bit of shit in whatever way it is.
And you are currently in college pursuing a degree in psychology. So you're definitely going the education route as well. But is your main goal to be a jujitsu athlete and make the most out of that? Or are you trying to also do something in the educational world or take your degree to a different level in another way?
Yeah, so I mean, my goal, I always like having both things because honestly, I find it very refreshing to have multiple things I'm going for. I think I have like so much energy as long as I'm switching from thing to thing. Like I can go to jujitsu and focus on it, but I don't need to do it for 12 hours a day. Now I have something else that I can also put a different type of energy towards. And it keeps me always learning, always like being creative and focusing on new things. But I'm going to take the jujitsu thing as far as I possibly can. If that means that, I win ADCC and I have a school and I'm doing seminars and that's how I make most of my money, then that's what it's going to be. And if it's some combination of having a job and doing jujitsu, whatever it may be, but I'm going to be doing jujitsu. I know that for sure.
And so a lot of your matches are at featherweight. But I see that you had a match against Victoria Anthony, who, is very small. So what is your ideal weight class that you like to compete in? And what was your initial reaction when Mo Jassim announced that there is another division for women coming up for 2024 ADCC?
Yeah, so I won worlds at purple belt at featherweight. I do featherweight more, but I also like I won pans at lightweight, so I'm kind of in that range of like featherweight to lightweight, 125 to 135. But obviously ADCC, we kind of it was at 132 and now it's going to be like 121, which is a huge difference. Um I am definitely cutting to 121. There's no way I'm going up. It's just way too big of a weight class for me. So I would say anything from 121 to 135 is kind of my ideal range. I'm not a huge fan of cutting weight. I don't like to do it if I don't have to. I think especially as female athletes, like there's sometimes too much pressure on cutting weight, and I think that it's just healthier if you're going to be competing a lot to go at your walk around weight, just because women are also different than men. We have a lot of hormonal things we have to deal with. So if you can compete closer to your natural weight, I think it's better.
I always like to get the fighter's perspective on what their ideal weight class is, because when you see people only through the internet, sometimes you
Mhm.
can't tell how big or small they are. Like for some reason,
Yeah.
I thought Kaya Jackson from 10th Planet Decatur, I don't know why I just imagined her to be like bigger than me because she's so muscular and stuff.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
friend Alandria Brown, but they're actually shorter than me. So I was like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
this is so funny. So it's good to know that you compete a lot at featherweight and lightweight, but for
Mhm.
ADCC, you're eyeballing that 121 division.
For sure. Yeah. And then like with Victoria, it was like when we had those two weight classes, people who were really, really small kind of got screwed because like, that was the smallest weight class for her, but it was 132 and she probably walks around like I think she fights MMA at like flyweight or something. So she's tiny, but
Does
she's
she fight
strong.
at flyweight
she's
or not atom weight or straw weight at least?
Wha it's like 109 or 115, one of those.
Okay, yeah, she is
Something
so
really
tiny
small.
but powerful. I love it.
Oh my god, she's probably one of the fastest people I've ever trained with too. I mean, she's so fast.
I need to go back and watch the match that you had with her. But in terms of wrestling, did you get to feel her wrath in that sense, or
Oh,
were
I
you quick
sat
to
down
pull
right
guard?
away. I sat down right away. I was like, "No, thank you."
I
Like, and
love
I know
that.
her too, and I've trained with her. I'm like, "I'm not gonna wrestle with, like" that's the thing about the rule set. It's like sometimes, obviously her wrestling is way better than mine, but the rule set was set up in a way where I could pull guard and I could go to what I knew how to do, and that was that. But, like, that's just how it is sometimes.
So, what is your take on EBI overtime? Is it something that you like to compete consistently at, or are you more focused on other things?
Yeah, I don't really like EBI overtime. Not to, like, hate on it, like, but I just think it's a little bit I would prefer to just have it kind of more similar to ADCC where it's like a points overtime or maybe even like sudden death, whoever scores the first point, first submission, whatever. I think that's a little more accurate than, starting in a fully dominant position. I think it's just like something that if you train it a lot and you specialize in it a lot, then you can beat people who you like wouldn't necessarily beat in any other type of overtime.
Yes. And when it comes to the most entertaining rule set, what rule set do you think is most entertaining to not jujitsu athletes, but BJJ casuals who are just trying to like get into the sport and watch it for entertainment? What do you think is the most entertaining rule set?
ADCC by far, like it's not even a competition. It's honestly so hard to score in ADCC. We see so many scrambles. It's really difficult to like solidify positions and get scoring positions that it forces people to just, really go for it. They also have a lot of rules that kind of benefit the person attacking. So it gives a lot of incentive for people to go for submissions that they might not have gone for given the rules were like IBJJF style or something like that.
So your competition that you have upcoming this week, they're not going to be under the ADCC rule set. So tell me how the difference in strategy and preparation is for a competition you have this weekend versus what you're going to be doing for when ADCC West Coast Trials comes around.
Yeah, so I try to compartmentalize it. So I'm doing IBJJF Worlds in December. So therefore, the competition I'm doing this weekend is going to be an IBJJF Open. And what that means in training is, I'm going to do longer rounds. I'm going to do 10-minute rounds because that's black belt. And I'm going to focus more on points when I'm training. So I'm not going to give up positions or go for as many submissions that might end with me on bottom. I'm going to keep track of scoring in my brain. When we're at comp class, we tend to break up the training in that type of way anyway. So if a lot of people have a certain type of competition coming up, we're going to do more IBJJF style rounds. Um, you know, but once it gets to ADCC, then I'm going to do more ADCC opens. Then the training is going to be different. Literally at Comcast, we'll do rounds that are 6 minutes, 3 minutes points, 3 minutes no points, things like that. So we definitely make sure that we emulate the competition in the training room as well.
That is amazing that that is the, I guess, the
The
caliber
standard.
and the standard, the expectation that you guys do at Atos. I know
Mhm.
you train with Rhodes as well. She used to train at the gym that I'm currently at, which is
Mhm.
10 Planet West LA. It's a very laid back gym. Like we have some competitors and stuff, but it's much more of like a friendly, more of like a bro place, if you will. Like there's a
Yes,
lot of
for
guys
sure.
that just go to smoke and hang out with their
Smoke and
friends, and
hang
it's
out
not
and
super.
yeah, for sure.
But it is definitely interesting to hear from your perspective that there is like a certain way to train for specific rule sets and strategies. And I think that was something that we saw in the one championship inaugural submission grappling title between Danielle Kelly and Jessica Kahn. Was Jessica Kahn, she didn't really plan for using
Yeah.
the cage and being pinned up against a cage. So when you look at the opportunities happening in one championship, there are belts on the line and a lot
Mhm.
of hype behind them. So is eventually getting to a point like one championship something that you put as a goal of yours, or are you more focused on the more traditional route in jujitsu?
Oh,
Jujitsu.
I would go into one right away. I would go in right now. I would go take a match with Danielle Kelly like that. Like, I love what one is doing. I love the rule set. I'm super down to fight on a cage. I've trained with plenty of MMA fighters. I've done a ton of wall work with them. I think that, if you go in and you're not prepared to do wall work, it really throws you off. Like, you can't go into it and just play your normal game plan. Jessa's jujitsu is beautiful and she has beautiful jujitsu. I think if she would have played a smarter game plan, she could have done a lot in that match. It's just that when someone does something that's so hyper specific that they've been game planning for and it's a smart game plan, the results are going to end a lot differently than if you would also come in with that kind of game plan. So I think it's all about preparation, but I totally want to be in one for sure.
That'd be amazing. And I know you
Yeah.
definitely have a coach that can get you to that level. Andre Galvao gave you your black belt when you were about 6 years into your jujitsu journey. So tell me how you were able to kind of expedite that journey to black belt, because it often takes people over 10 years. So how were you able to hone in on the details and really get to the black belt level so quickly?
Well, one, I'm really obsessive, like just naturally as a person. Like when I do something, I fully, like wholeheartedly do it. So naturally, I just did jujitsu every single day. And then when I ended up at Autos, I was surrounded by people who have already done the entire journey that I was aiming to do. So, like, I immediately was put in a situation where I had guidance every single day from world champions, ADCC champions of like, do this, do this. Oh, you should train like this, like, do this. So, I had all this guidance. And I think that that was an invaluable kind of part of my journey. And I think it was naturally structured in a way where, I was having that progression that maybe I wouldn't have had without that guidance. So I also I try to train with a lot of different people. I've gone to a lot of different gyms. I've studied a lot of jujitsu. I kind of view it the same way that I view school. So people always kind of make fun of me because I like have like a notebook and I have like, I'm always writing notes. I'm always like analyzing things like that. But I think that's kind of what school gave me was a way of knowing how to study. And I just treat it like it's school. And then like that's how I track my progression. That's how I learn. And I think that really helps me.
I definitely think it's no coincidence that some of the top jujitsu practitioners are also very cerebral. And then you also
Mhm.
just have the athletes that are able to dominate who with their athletic background. But I think that when you take people who have like a nursing background, like Katie Bochenik, she,
Mhm.
is able to just move in a way that I feel like when she goes for a submission, she just understands the human anatomy so much that it helps her so much in her jujitsu game.
100%. Yeah. I think there's those people who like just naturally have that kind of athletic reaction and they go more by feel. Especially some of the guys, I feel like they're just athletes and they're just tough and that they just learn through kind of like physically doing it. And then there's like the
Procedural athlete.
nerds. Yeah. There's like the nerds who are like, oh, I'm going to analyze every little angle of this position. And, each one of those works for different people, but I'm definitely one of the nerds.
Some great insight there. I do want to talk about a few hot topics that we have in the jujitsu world. So one, a very basic one for a female competitor or a female starting out in jujitsu. Obviously, jujitsu is very in personal space with each other, and sometimes people can abuse power in that sense and either make the mats like a dating place, or worst of the worst on the spectrum is like being creepy towards someone that doesn't want anything to do with them. So, what
Mhm.
is your take on dating on the mats? And then also, if you have any piece of advice, if you're a girl or a guy dealing with someone on the mats that's being a little bit too much with you, what are some steps that you can take to kind of get rid of that situation and that problem on the mats?
Yeah, very interesting topic. So people get really heated about the like dating on the mats thing. I think there's different ways, there's different things to consider. Like one is if it's like an instructor who's kind of using that instructor role and every white belt girl who comes in the door, they're kind of like hitting on them and making that just a dating pool. I think that's a little bit different than maybe like two purple belts who are just hanging out and then they kind of start dating and things like that. I think that whatever you choose to do, it's always a risk. And if you're being respectful and responsible about it, I think like it's fine, but you need to be aware that if things don't work out, that is now a situation that's in your gym and it might ruin the training for you or them, or one of you might leave. And that's something that you always have to consider. But that is different than like instructors doing it. I think there is a very fine line between like maintaining professionalism and kind of like abusing that position that you have in order to kind of like gain notoriety with like girls and stuff. So that one I'm not so into. But as far as like creepy guys, yeah, that happens for sure. Like I've dealt with situations where I'm like, okay, that was too much, that was weird, and what am I gonna do about it? And usually I will like I'm really comfortable with a lot of the guys at my gym, like, professors and people that I trust. And if I have a real problem, like, I'm going to tell them about it because they don't want that either. Like, they don't want the people in their gym doing that because that's representative of the team and of the gym. So if something like that is actually happening, I definitely would talk to someone. Talk to your local mat enforcer. You know what I mean? Like the guy who you go to and you're like, hey, this dude's being creepy. Like, y'all need to handle this. And I know a lot of people who like are there to help and protect the women of this team, and they're looking out for us and things like that. But the other thing is that I feel like sometimes women feel like they have to roll with people at the gym. Like I feel like there's a lot of pressure on women that like you're rude if you say no, or like you need to roll with this guy just because he asked, or he's an upper belt and I should roll with him. And I just want to be clear that like you don't have to roll with anyone who makes you uncomfortable ever. Like if someone made you uncomfortable one time and now you feel kind of weird, just say no to them. I don't care if it's a black belt. I don't care if it's like the owner of the school. If they make you uncomfortable, feel like use that voice and be like, no, thank you. Like, and be firm about that because that will help you feel more comfortable in the gym and you won't feel forced to do something you don't want to do.
Such great advice, and something that I'm sure there are many girls out there looking to hear as someone who's been in the jiu-jitsu world for so long, especially for new white belt girls. Sometimes you don't know what it's like to have that, either a higher belt or a coach or an instructor, and not being able to feel comfortable enough to say no or stand your ground. So I think that is some really important insight. So thank you for sharing on our first hot topic.
Yeah, that took me a long time to like actually be able to be like, no, I don't want to roll. Like I don't want to. And that's fine. You don't even have to give a reason. Just like no, thank you.
Yeah, a simple no is completely, it'll go a long way. And
Yeah.
for our
No,
second hot
please.
topic, it is not as juicy as the one that we just talked about. But for our second hot topic, what are your thoughts on aggressively pulling guard in competition? And I know it's kind of like on a spectrum. It's probably super essential, at black belt levels, but then also, blue belt and on. What is your thoughts on jumping guard?
Yeah. It's a difficult topic because like it's one of those things where if it goes wrong, it goes catastrophically wrong. Um, and the same thing with like the scissor takedown, from the like trying to go into the honey hole right away. Those are the ones where we see those catastrophic knee injuries. I am a believer that like at the lower belts, I wouldn't be upset if it was completely banned because I think like if you're relying on that anyway, like if that's the thing that you're relying on, like as a white, blue, and purple belt, like there's a lot of other aspects of your game that you need to be focusing on. And if that's the only way you can get to close guard, I think you should figure out another way that's a little bit safer. Because they don't have as much control. They don't have that knowledge, that mat time that's gonna like let them know just in the moment of what's really, really dangerous and what's safe to do. At black belt, it's kind of like I think it's okay just because there's so many situations that could go so catastrophically wrong that it's like I don't think it's any more dangerous than ripping a heel hook as hard as you can. Um, but it is tricky. It's super tricky. It's for slams and things like that, I think that's different because like you can literally break your neck. But for jumping guard, I think at black belt you kind of have to let them make that decision.
Yes, very good take on that. I mean, I am only a white belt, and I already had a similar situation with jumping guard. She didn't even like fully jump guard. She just incorrectly
And
pulled guard. Oh yeah, it was like a knee hyperextension. Luckily nothing. I never actually had an MRI or anything, but it was
yeah,
fine. It was just one of those like, quick little pop knee, nothing pop, but like I saw it in the video. I was like, "Ooh, that hurt." I can see why that didn't feel good.
yeah, at Autos, we don't allow any jumping guard, flying scissor takedown. We don't allow any flying stuff like that in training because there's just no point of taking that kind of risk in training. Like if you want to go home and drill that with someone, like go ahead. But like in training when it's comp class and everyone's going hard, like we don't even allow that.
And for our final hot topic, there was some recent news, I think in ADCC and NAGA, they announced that they are making it a rule that no biological men can sign up for a women's competition even if they are currently in their transitioning process. So have you ever been in a situation where you have competed against a biological man that is competing as a female and in the transitioning process? And what is your take on the situation? Because it is a hot topic, and it's, something that a lot of people want to talk about, but it's also, not black and white.
It's not. No, I haven't. I have never dealt with a situation like that. But I do think there's a lot that goes into it. I also see a lot of people like when they justify trans athletes competing in the women's division. A lot of them will give examples of like women beating men. They'll be like, oh, Amanda Leve used to beat men in this situation, so it's not even different, it's about the jiu-jitsu. But I think that that's very different, because the instances where like women are beating men, or women are beating trans athletes, there's a huge skill discrepancy in those situations. Like Amanda Leve was beating men because she was way better at jiu-jitsu than them. But if you have like two evenly matched black belts who are even weight and things like that, and the skill is even, I think that's when those advantages might come into play. And I don't think you could put like any two, a female and a male black belt together who are the same weight, and I would bet you that almost every single time the guy's gonna win. Like it's probably how it's gonna go. Um, so I think the rule is good, but there's a lot of problems with what just happened as well. Because if you think about it, what the rule that I just saw was like you have to compete at your biological sex, right? So that means that someone who transitioned all the way to male, from female to male, and has been on, hormone replacement therapy for however many years, that means they have to compete in the women's category, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like they were biologically female, even though they underwent a transition. Now that rule is saying that they have to compete at whatever is on their birth certificate. So that's like, something that I think a lot of people may not have considered with the black and white kind of blanket rule that they just put out.
I didn't think about that aspect. I'm going to have to see about the wording of it, because I'm
Yeah, because
wondering
it
if
says
they.
you have to compete as what you were biologically born at, which means a transitioned person who's already transitioned to male has to do the female division. So you could have someone who like looks like a guy, has been, on a hormone replacement therapy for years, has really high testosterone, who now has to do the women's division. I'm a little confused, and I think there's a lot of nuance that kind of has to be brought into it. I agree that there needs to be regulations, because I think there is an advantage with male to female trans athletes, but I think there's like a lot more that has to be looked into on like how we actually can make it work.
Yes, and I think one way that your teammate Rose Miller put it that was very, it's so simple, but it's something that people overlook a lot, is just listening more to trans stories. Because at the
Mhm.
end of the day, like I do completely understand, like, they go through a lot, and to be able to have a platform or a space that they can compete is 100% necessary. Like no one should ever be fully excluded from anything because of what they choose to identify as. And I think just understanding more of their stories, but then also how can we make the future easier for everyone and fair. But that's such a good point on your take
Right.
that
I
like.
don't think people are thinking about, not that it's like something that necessarily is gonna happen all the time, but like if you're making a rule that's so black and white, like that is something that eventually probably will happen, right? Like statistically.
Very interesting. Can always count on you for another take. She is a psychology major, so thinking about things that other people don't think about is something that Amanda Bruse is good about. I know you do have a lot of different brands that you kind of have been working with. I saw the massage gun. 100% need that in my life. So if there's any
Amazing.
sponsors, teammates, or anyone you want to give a shout out to, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sponsors right now. My real sponsor is BJJ Mental Models. It's a platform where you can get video footage and competition footage reviewed by black belts. So that's amazing. I'm also on there, so you can get your stuff reviewed by me. And then I'll plug my own brand, Kimono Boutique. So I have a female only apparel brand. So we make female jiu-jitsu gear. We have gis and rash guards right now. Soon we're gonna have shorts and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's about it as far as brands.